The day I found out I was pregnant, I thought I was holding the happiest news of my entire life. I remember standing in my bathroom, staring at those two small lines on the pregnancy test. My hands were shaking, but not because I was scared. I was overwhelmed with happiness. For years, Daniel and I had talked about becoming parents. We imagined decorating a baby's room, choosing names, and watching our child take their first steps. I smiled at myself in the mirror and whispered, "We're finally going to be a family." I had no idea that the same moment that brought me so much happiness would also reveal the truth about the man I married. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my husband left me when I was pregnant, how I survived the hardest years of my life, and how I discovered that losing him was actually the beginning of finding myself. I met Daniel when I was 26 years old. At that time, I wasn't looking for a relationship. I was focused on my career, my goals, and building a future for myself. But Daniel was different. He was confident, funny, and he had a way of making ordinary moments feel special. He would send me messages just to tell me he missed me. He remembered small details about my life that most people forgot. When I was having a difficult day at work, he was the person I wanted to call. When something exciting happened, he was the first person I wanted to tell. After 2 years together, he proposed. I still remember that night. We were sitting in a small restaurant where we had our first date. Daniel held my hand and told me that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. I believed him. I believed every word. We got married the following year. The first few years were beautiful. We weren't rich, but we were happy. We built our home slowly. We bought furniture one piece at a time. We saved money for vacations. We made plans for the future. I thought I had found my forever person. Then, after 5 years of marriage, I found out I was pregnant. I couldn't wait to tell Daniel. I imagined his face lighting up. I imagined him picking me up and laughing with happiness. But when I told him something was different, he didn't smile. He didn't hug me. He just looked at me silently. "Daniel?" I asked. "Are you okay?" He looked away and said, "I just didn't expect this." At first, I thought he was just shocked. Maybe he needed time to process becoming a father. I tried to stay positive. I told myself, he will come around. But days passed, then weeks. And the man who used to come home early just to spend time with me started staying out later and later. His phone was always in his hand. He became distant. Conversations that used to last hours became short answers. "I'm tired. I have work. Can we talk later?" I felt like I was losing my husband while carrying his child. One night when Daniel was asleep, I saw his phone on the table. I wasn't trying to invade his privacy. I wasn't looking for a reason to be upset. But something inside me told me that something was wrong. And when I saw the messages, my entire world stopped. The person I trusted the most had been hiding a completely different life from me. I sat there frozen, unable to move. I had so many questions. How long had this been happening? Why wasn't I enough? How could someone promise to love me forever and then hurt me when I needed them the most? The next morning, I confronted him. I expected him to apologize. I expected him to fight for our marriage. Instead, Daniel looked at me and said something I will never forget. "Maybe I made a mistake getting married." Those words hurt more than anything else. Not because he was angry, but because he said them so calmly, like our entire marriage meant nothing. I placed my hand on my pregnant stomach and asked, "What about our baby?" He looked away, and that was the moment I realized I was standing alone, even though I was still married. 3 days later, Daniel packed his bags. He told me he needed space, but deep down, I knew the truth. He wasn't looking for space. He was walking away from me, from our marriage, and from his own child. That night, I sat alone in our bedroom, holding my wedding ring in my hand. I cried until I had no tears left. I didn't know how I would survive. I didn't know how I would raise a child alone. I didn't know how I would rebuild my life. But what I didn't know at that moment was this: the woman Daniel left behind would not be the same woman who would rise again. The first few weeks after Daniel left were the hardest weeks of my life. Every morning I woke up hoping that maybe everything had been a nightmare. Maybe Daniel would come home. Maybe he would realize what he had done. Maybe he would look at me, apologize, and tell me that he wanted to fix our family. But every day I woke up to the same reality. I was alone, pregnant, and preparing to become a mother without the person who promised he would always stand beside me. My friends and family tried to support me. They told me that I would be okay. They told me that Daniel's choice was his loss, not mine. But when you are the person living through the pain, those words don't always feel real. There were nights when I sat in the baby's room. We had started preparing and wondered how I was going to do everything by myself. I worried about money. I worried about the future. I worried about whether my child would grow up wondering why their father wasn't there. Those thoughts kept me awake many nights, but every time I felt like giving up, I placed my hand on my stomach and reminded myself, there is someone who needs me. I have to be strong. A few months later, my daughter was born. The moment I held her for the first time, everything changed. I remember looking at her tiny face and feeling a kind of love I had never experienced before. She had no idea how much she had already changed my life. I named her Lily, and from that day forward, every decision I made was for her. The first year was not easy. I was exhausted all the time. I would wake up in the middle of the night to take care of her, then wake up early in the morning to go to work. Some days, I felt like I was running on nothing but determination. There were moments when I looked at other families and wondered why mine had to be different. I would see fathers playing with their children in the park and feel a sadness I couldn't explain. Lily deserved that. She deserved a father who wanted to be there. But I slowly learned something important. A child doesn't need a perfect family. A child needs love. And I was going to give her all the love I had. Daniel rarely contacted us in the beginning. Occasionally, he would send a message asking how Lily was doing. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to tell him that he had missed everything. Her first smile, her first steps, her first words. But I decided something. I didn't want my daughter to grow up surrounded by anger, so I answered calmly. I kept my emotions away from her, because Lily deserved peace. A few years passed. Life slowly started becoming more stable. I worked harder than I ever had before. I took extra projects. I learned new skills. I saved every dollar I could. There were times when I wanted to buy something for myself, but I would think about Lily's future instead. I wasn't just building a life. I was building a foundation for my daughter. Slowly, my hard work started paying off. I started a small online business from my home. At first, it was just me sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop after Lily went to sleep. Nobody knew how many nights I spent working while everyone else was resting. Nobody saw the tears I wiped away when things didn't work out. Nobody saw the moments when I almost quit. But I kept going. Because I remembered the woman I was on the night Daniel left. That woman was broken. She thought her life was over. She thought losing her husband meant losing everything. But she was wrong. Losing Daniel forced me to discover a strength I never knew I had. Years passed. Lily grew older. She became the happiest part of my life. She was curious, kind, and always wanted to help others. Sometimes she would ask questions about her father. "Mom, does Dad miss me?" Those questions were difficult because I didn't want to lie to her, but I also didn't want my pain to become her pain. So I always told her, "Your father made his choices, but you were never the reason he left." I wanted her to know one thing: she was never unwanted. She was never a mistake. She was the best thing that ever happened to me. By the time Lily was 10 years old, my small business had grown into something I never imagined. I hired employees. I moved into a better home. I was finally able to breathe. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. I looked at my life and realized something. The person who broke my heart had unknowingly pushed me toward the life I was always capable of creating. I no longer needed Daniel to complete my story. I had created my own, but I didn't know that my past was about to come back. I didn't know that the man who walked away from me years earlier would soon stand in front of me again. And this time, he would be the one asking for another chance. 10 years had passed since the night Daniel walked out of our home. 10 years since I sat on the floor of our bedroom, holding my wedding ring and wondering how I would survive. Back then, I thought losing my husband was the end of my life, but I was wrong. It was the beginning of a life I never imagined. By then, I was no longer the woman who begged someone to stay. I was a mother. I was a business owner. I was someone who had learned how to stand on her own. My life was not perfect. I still had difficult days. I still carry memories from the past. But I was happy. And most importantly, Lily was happy. She was 10 years old now. She was smart, creative, and had a heart bigger than anyone I knew. Sometimes I looked at her and couldn't believe how quickly time had passed. I remembered holding her as a newborn, wondering if I would be enough. And now she was the person who reminded me that I had already won the biggest battle of my life. One ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. I was sitting in my office reviewing some documents when my assistant walked in. She looked surprised. "Sarah, there is someone here who wants to see you." I looked up from my desk. "Who is it?" She hesitated for a moment. Then she said a name I hadn't heard in years. Daniel. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. It felt like the past had suddenly walked back into my present. A part of me wanted to ignore him. A part of me wanted to tell him he had no right to appear after disappearing for 10 years. But another part of me wanted to understand. Why now? Why after all this time? I told my assistant to let him in. When Daniel entered the room, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked older, not just physically. There was something different about him. The confidence he once carried was gone. He stood there quietly, looking at the woman he had abandoned years ago. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then he finally spoke. "You look different." I smiled slightly. "A lot can change in 10 years. He looked around my office. He saw the success I had built, the company I created, the life I created without him. "I heard about your business," he said. "I'm proud of you." I looked at him and wondered how strange those words sounded coming from him. Proud of me? He wasn't there when I worked until midnight. He wasn't there when Lily was sick and I stayed awake all night taking care of her. He wasn't there when I had to make impossible choices. But I didn't say any of those things. I just asked, "Why are you here, Daniel?" He looked down. And for the first time, I saw something I never expected: regret. I made mistakes. I stayed silent. "I was selfish," he continued. I thought I was choosing freedom. I thought I was missing out on something better. He paused. But I lost the best thing I ever had. I listened carefully. 10 years ago, those words were exactly what I wanted to hear. I wanted him to realize my value. I wanted him to regret leaving, but now that moment had arrived. And it felt different, because I was no longer waiting for his apology. I had already healed. Do you know what hurt the most? I asked him. Daniel looked at me. It wasn't that you left. It was that you left when I needed you the most. You didn't just leave me, Daniel. You left your daughter. His expression changed. I know. No, I said calmly. I don't think you do. You missed her first steps. You missed her first day of school. You missed every birthday where she looked at the door hoping you would walk in. Daniel looked away. For the first time, I saw him understand the weight of his choices. I want to fix things, he said. I want to be part of her life. I took a deep breath. This was the moment I had imagined for years. The moment where Daniel would come back. The moment where I would finally have power. But something unexpected happened. I realized I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to destroy him. I didn't want him to suffer. I just wanted him to understand. You can try to build a relationship with Lily, I said, but you need to understand something. You are not coming back to the family you left. You are meeting the family that survived without you. Daniel nodded slowly. Months passed after that meeting. Daniel slowly started becoming part of Lily's life. It wasn't easy. Trust takes time to rebuild. And some wounds don't disappear just because someone says sorry. But I watched Lily make her own choice. She decided what kind of relationship she wanted with him, and I respected that. As for me, I moved forward. I learned something important. Sometimes we spend years waiting for someone who hurt us to realize our worth.